Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 82. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons, and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. Today we're connecting with David Chametzky. David is an inspirational speaker and a deep message expert who opens your eyes to aligning with your life journey in the best way possible, whether on a personal or on a business level. David shares his mediumship and his reiki journeys, and also shares some of his most personal, heartfelt and memorable paranormal experiences. So let's get into our interview with David. Welcome, David. It's wonderful to have you here with us today on Perfectly Paranormal. Would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your connection to the paranormal?
Yeah, so what I do is I'm a speaker. I call myself a deep message expert. And what that really means is I help people with their stories to become an author if they'd like to be, get on stages, or create their own podcast. And what we do is when I work with them, they align all that story and their personal messages in an aligned way to make their brand so much stronger, to really become more alive, be part of their brand. Like my brand, you can see the book in the back. It says, it's your time to soar. When your heart says it's your time to soar. That's one of the pieces of my brand, because we walk each other from the ashes of our lives like a phoenix till we find the right path, being able to walk through it. And that's the name of my practice, is On the Path, because Ram Dass, if you remember, he said we walk each other home. So if we're walking each other home, and then we could do what we do is when we gain enough speed, enough confidence, we are able to soar. And no matter where we are in life, there's always a level up to go. And that's what I do. Is I enjoy it. I've been doing it for a while. It really is helpful when you can get past the obstacles that might have been in your way to achieve something that you never thought you could do.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know that you have a bit of a background in mediumship, because I met you very briefly and you
Yeah.
mentioned mediumship, and that's kind of how we got together. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on the paranormal, what you think about it, how it's part of your life, how it presents in your life, and what sort of experiences that you have.
At one point, I just thought it was all outside of me. One of the first times I really embraced going to a medium, I went to a medium because my kid's mom, well, before we got married, she was like, that's what she wanted for her birthday. And I said, no problem. I'm going to go also, because I've heard so much about these things. And I went, and wow, I was amazed at what the reading came through. And most of us then put those mediums outside of us. And I always was like, oh my God, that was so incredible. He mentioned things that he couldn't have known, right? It wasn't even, hey, knowing my background, he could have picked things up. There were stories that he told that nobody else could tell. So I felt he was valid. And at some point, you go through life. I mean, I had gone through at that point, I had already lost what I thought was the love of my life. And she is one of the love of my life, was my girlfriend, who died in our 20s because she was hit by a drunk driver. And I didn't know I was carrying survivor guilt to manage that. So I'd been in a dark period, just sort of isolation, but not necessarily, complete isolation, for about 5 years. And at some point, I had dreams of her. There was one dream, that the first paranormal experience I had was shortly after she died. Her brother, I was very close with her family. Her brother said, Dave, I need you to come out for dinner. And I said, yeah, I had a dream this week. He goes, I need you to come out for dinner. I go, okay, Brian, I'm out. I'm coming out. One of his daughters was, I was a godfather to them. And so he goes, I want you to tell his wife the story, Carol, the story. And he goes, I'm going to be outside the room, And I told, and she's like crying. And when the girlfriend, this Sandy, was killed, she was killed by a drunk driver. She was walking on the street. I didn't know a lot of the details then, but we found the details afterwards. But I had told her to go to the party that night. So years later, I had survivor guilt. But the dream that I had, there was only one other person in the world who knew I was going to ask her to marry me in 3 weeks when she came home for Thanksgiving here in the States. So I have this dream. The dream is of her holding her ring, and she goes, "Don't worry, I still have the ring." And she goes, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." And I go, "Okay." And this is after she's passed on. So then her brother also had a dream within a day or so, that the same dream. And he's the only person in the world that knew about the ring. He goes, "I had a dream about the ring." And I said, "I got to tell you about the dream about the ring." He goes, and his wife then told both of our stories. We were basically at the same place where she was killed. We didn't know it wasn't near us. She was in Stanford College, which is 3,000 miles. We're here in New York. So it wasn't an area that we would normally see. And we had that story. And I was like, she came to us to tell us that she's okay. I was like, nah, that can't be true. It's just a coincidence, right? I didn't want to give in completely. And then she had come to me at other times. And at one point, which made me sort of get back into my life after a number of years, there was a grave, and there was a hole next to sort of like hers. It wasn't really hers, but in my dream it was. And she goes, either you're going to get in or you're going to get out. You're not ready yet. And it was a bunch of years. I didn't date. I didn't, like most people in their 20s, they go, "Oh man, we have our parties." Not that my 20s were bad, but my 20s weren't, dating and all that stuff. It was, grieving for the first love of my life.
Yeah, wow. Now, I know you are a very, very inspirational speaker. I see you a lot on Facebook talking about the events that you go to, how you're promoting mental and emotional health in people, the way you do your comedy, the way you do your inspirational speaking. Do you find that a lot of that is intuitive? Like it comes to you as you're doing the speaking, like your psychic skills must be highly connected to what is out there in the universe.
Very much so. I didn't embrace it all the time because I had some other instances that came through, but what I've done is embraced. So I remember going to a class, how to learn how to be a medium, and I was able to do that. And then I said, I don't want the talent because I was sitting across from a man who had, within a couple of months, lost the love of his life as an older gentleman. And I was able to tell them within a seating location in Yankee Stadium here in New York about this big breasted woman wearing a Yankee jersey, blonde, and and I open my eyes and he's crying. He goes, "That's her." And I go, "She's fine." And I've done this a few times. So I do use my intuitive skills when I'm working with people, when I feel it really strongly. Like I get the hairs on my neck raised a little bit. So, I do use it in the work that I do. And then that's why there's a lot of times when I speak, people are like, "Oh, that was great. Can you say that again?" And I'm like, "No, I can't." I don't know where it's coming from. I do believe it's a gift of God. There's a lot of times that I hear the things that I need to tell other people. There's been times where I've reached out to friends and I go, "I know this is going to sound weird, but can I just share this with you?" And they're like, "How'd you know? Who told you?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then we talk it out, and I'm like, you know, that's why I feel I'm very in touch with a lot of things. I don't always understand it. That's where I always ask, "Hey, could you give me a little hint and clue on how to move forward on things?" Sometimes it's trust your gut, and other times I'm like, "Okay, I just have to wait till the timing is right." That's the part that's really hard as a human being. We want to know everything, but sometimes we need to not know.
So when you get your information, do you find that it comes to you, or do you feel that you do like a type of channeling where you actually go to, in your mind, do you feel like you go to another place where that information comes?
A little bit of both. It just comes to me. Like I might be talking to you, and then I'll be like, "Can I just ask you this one question?" And then I'm like, "Okay, can we just talk about this a little bit?" I try to always be in that place to be open for certain things, but I've also asked not to do many readings because for me, I don't want to deal with the sadness. While this gentleman was happy that his partner was fine, though, seeing him cry, I was like, "Oh, I wanted to hug him." I'd like to use the skills that I've been granted differently. But there's times that I will. My friend Alex, who every now and then she's going through some challenges, and I go, your parents say this is exactly what you got to do. You can resist on it, but I go, I'm telling you." She goes, "What are you talking about?" And then I share, or I've shared just because they're almost yelling at me, like, "You need to tell her." And like there's certain days that I call her up and I'm like, I know we haven't spoken in a while. Is this going on? She goes, what did you know? Who called you? And I'm like, I'm telling you, your parents came to me and they're telling you what to do. It's up to you to do it. So there's sometimes that I feel, and I'd heard this quote once, that God sometimes works anonymously through us. I love that quote because for me, it's some of my gifts I know are God given. I have I just posted something like that today where I said, I never thought I was a religious person because I had the bar too high. And not that the bar moved, it was that I rose because I now see things differently. That God is for all of us, not just the people who follow every rule or what it is. It's your relationship with God, which is something that I've always shared. You don't have to be pious, don't break the rules, but with God, God knows what's in your heart. And if you can be honest in your heart, it's like that anything else. Like if you could be authentic in what you're doing, the magic will come to you.
And if you like this episode, you want to learn more about the paranormal, I'm always sharing new information that nobody else does. Please hit the subscribe button. Send me a comment. Send me one of your stories. Absolutely. I find that God is not just about religion. I find it's more a spiritual connection. I find that when you take the word religion out of God, people relax more. Like I talk about God and I'm very spiritually based. I was brought up Catholic, but I don't particularly follow that regime of belief. I believe in everything. All the religions all come back to one point. They're all spiritual in nature. So what I wanted to ask you is, when you talk to different types of people, whether they have religious backgrounds or non-religious backgrounds, do you find that you have to change the language to suit the way, or do your guides, your angels, whoever's speaking through you, do they change the language that you're using when you're speaking to specific people?
I don't. I sometimes do lend myself to try to speak in the language that they understand. So when I work with people of a Christian faith, I might use the Jesus figure more often. But my girls are raised Roman Catholic. I come from a Jewish faith, and I remember going to pre-Cana and talking to the priest, and we had a really good time, and we built a really nice relationship. He said, "Am I going to have a problem?" And I said, "No. As far as I know, Jesus was Jewish when he passed. He reports to God, right? And my faith believes that I talk directly to God, right? The Jewish faith believes there's no intermediary. We don't pray through somebody. We pray to Hashem or Yahweh. So using that opportunity, I always go, it's fine, man. I just talk to the boss directly. I don't use an operator, not being disrespectful. And, we used to joke around when I would take my girls to religious training and then I'd say, he'd be like, we'd sit in the front row. The girls love to sit in the front row. So here I am in the front row as a Jewish gentleman. And he goes, you okay with the front row? I go, well, I'm watching out for the other Jewish guy. And we just laugh about it because I feel if we're respectful of all of our religions, our beliefs, there's so much power in that. And that's why when I do Reiki as well, Reiki doesn't talk about, and even Buddhism doesn't really talk about, it talks about the universal energy. And when we talk about the universal energy, if we can get past the names that we give, that's really where we're all at, that we're all human beings moving the energy. And that's what I like to talk about. Also, sometimes we get so stuck in our ideas. I had a conversation with somebody and I said, well, Jesus sinned. And no, 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 no. And then she found a YouTube channel that, that did say that he sinned. I didn't go, he's a sinner. He didn't do, we make mistakes. So if we make a mistake, we learn from those mistakes. There's no way he spent 33 years and didn't do anything that was wrong. And even speaking his truth, it was the wrong of society. Not saying it was wrong, but that's it. But having that conversation on really what we are and how we have those conversations. He was a great man. He was a philosopher. He cared about giving. He did all the things that we need to give and do. And that's where we could tap into that universal energy. That's the beauty. That's where our hearts are. If you think about it, we get out of our heads into our hearts. That's where the power really comes into. And that's where you feel the gift of God.
So when you do your Reiki, Do you do hands-on Reiki? Do you do long-distance Reiki? And do you find that you get readings? Do you get information coming through for people as you're doing the work for them?
I do. So I do some hands-on. There's some of the modalities I use to help people. One of them is called havening, which is a psychosensory touch modality to help people through traumas. But I don't touch anybody. Make sure that no matter what I do, I don't physically touch anybody. So there's no questions of inappropriate touch. Anything I ask when I do Reiki, I said I might be close to your body. Is that comfortable? If not, it's also okay because I don't know if you use Reiki, you feel the burning in your hands. Once you start tapping into that energy, your hands really start burning. I didn't know that. I remember when the first friend that I experienced having it, my friend Patricia, she's like, feel my hands. She was going to do a healing and her hands were burning. And I'm like, that's just crazy. And after she turned it off, the power, the energy, my hands got back to normal. And I didn't experience that till I started learning it. That's why we tap into that energetic field and what we call it. People like to call it God. Sometimes it is God. Just the way things happen. It's the alignment of the universe.
And I find that when you do work like Reiki, you don't need to touch the person's body because their energy field radiates sort of to like a meter on either side. It's like this big bubble around the person. You're actually standing in that bubble with the person.
I mean, that's why even when I do the mental wellness piece, I could do a lot of it by video and things like that. And I sense one of the things is when I do havening, you can just sense the way the voice cracks a little bit, and then you've got in there. Or sometimes an eye movement the right way. I notice it and I'm like, all right, we got you. How do you feel? And that's why I go, is it paranormal? I go, yeah, I don't know. But I've had other instances. I mean, I attempted suicide 5 years ago, and I was told by an angel that it's not my time and I need to go talk about mental wellness. And so I said, please tell me your name. And it was a Grandpa Mike. I don't have a Grandpa Mike. So there's so many different pieces of when things happen. I'm like, now I ask the question.
Did you feel that at that time when you had those suicidal thoughts, was that a big changing point in your life? Was that when you were working on yourself and improving yourself that you could aspire to use those skills with others?
So I was already using the skills that I had, but I wasn't taking care of myself. And to me, that was the difference. And while we hear many stories of people attempting suicide and then having those second regrets afterwards, I was very comfortable. As part of my story, I wrote 50 letters to people to explain to them why I was doing it in a safe way, why I was doing it, and nothing anybody could have done could have changed my direction. Even when I felt I was losing consciousness, I was comfortable. Like, okay, buddy, here it is. It's kind of like when you go underwater and you're like, okay, I was comfortable. And then that's when Grandpa Mike Energy came to me and said, it's not your time. You're going back and you need to go talk about this. You need to do the things, make right. Even then, I've had some stories. I was once in the cemetery, and in the Jewish faith, they like to have 10 men called a minyan. And they needed an extra man. They go, would you mind helping us out? I go, I know exactly what you're doing. You don't need to explain, of course. And I left my daughter in the car. She was, 20 at that point, and we went in. Out of all the names this one gentleman who I didn't know, random, it was a Michael. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be. I get chills. I hear you. Don't feel sad. Keep your focus. So, it's all these like little paranormal stories that I've experienced, and I'm like, okay, we could say it's coincidence, but it's a little bit more. I don't know how to explain it properly, other than just saying it's that God energy, and it's really interesting. I know I've had other dreams besides that girlfriend. One time after my grandmother passed away, I saw her and I tried to talk to her, and then she ran away. Well, she pushed me away, not physically, energetically. You just don't know because we don't know. And because I was able to see people I had never met, like that gentleman's girlfriend, and people when I was learning how to do mediumship, I was like, wow. I mean, even just recently, I went with my girls to a medium. We were helping a friend teaching a medium class, and they go, you know all the answers. Like, they said, could you ask any questions? So I asked the question, and then they're telling me, they're laughing. They're going, you know all the answers. All the answers that you say are right. And I'm thinking in my head, and they're like, yes, you're right. I'm like, okay. It's just interesting. And I've noticed with other mediums as well, where I walk in and they're like, you have lots of energy, the medium type energy. I go, I think I do. They're like, no, you do. Just shut up and trust it. And that's where I tell everybody they can and they do have that energy. We just have to sometimes shut our brain down. That was the one part when I was learning it. I said, Bob, how do I learn how to do this? He goes, it's easy. You surrender. I go, okay, but how do I surrender? And he goes, you surrender. He goes, no feelings, no touches about anything. He goes, that's where you're messing it up. And he goes, like when we meditate, if you think of meditation as a leaf on a river, if you go to grab the leaf, you get distracted from the meditation. If you watch the leaf go by, it's a famous metaphor, but that's how you can meditate really well. So I always tell people, surrender. If you want to be a medium, surrender. I choose not to want to get it too much into mediumship because I have other skills, and I think that's where I'm being led, and that's exactly what I've been told.
Once you're open and you hit on that term of trusting and observing, you don't let your, what did I write down? We get in our own way quite
Oh
often.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
big
That's the
time.
trick. Yeah, that's the trick. If we can get out of our own way in life as well as in so many other ways, we can really soar. Take our time to soar. That's exactly what I always talk about.
When they start listening, they can actually get their own messages. But because they
Sure.
get in their own way and they're either frightened of it or religion has put a stopper on you doing any sort of spiritual or mediumship type work because you might be working with the devil, which isn't the case.
That's where I try to have, I have lots of, my best friend is a pastor, and I try to talk to him about it. And he goes, no, 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 this is my belief. And I go, I'm not looking to change your belief. But a lot of people, because we don't understand it. I go, but we don't understand God either. We know what love is. We know unconditional love. If it's unconditional love, then when somebody transitions, would they still own that love? When we look at the pearly gates, the stories, I go, isn't that supposedly the greatest love? So why would that stop? Why would the gates close and we lose that love? I go, no, I think it gets multiplied. And that's my hope. That's my belief. I'm sticking with it.
I think people get quite frightened by the unknown. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to observe it without reacting or
Very.
without creating paranormal drama. So, this is why I started this podcast, because I live in the world of the paranormal and it's part of life. Just like you were saying about the angels and archangels, spirit guides, and all that, that's all here with us. But so are the spirits and the lower vibrational beings. They're part of our environment and they all have jobs and they're all here for specific reasons. Do you have any memorable paranormal experiences that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I've had some great experiences. I mean, like even the experience once I embraced it differently when that woman came back to me, my girlfriend, I loved her. I mean, during the pandemic, I started reading some of the romantic stories I wrote and poems I wrote for her, and I cried. I felt she was with me to help me, that she's fine. And I'll tell you a funny story. So my mom was very resistant when she transitioned. She was very resistant to the transition, and she was in Houston. I was here in New York, in the States, so it's about 1,500 miles. Not sure how many kilometers, but it's a great distance. And I had already said goodbye to her in August because she stopped eating, and we stopped eating. That's what's going to happen. And she passed away in October, actually Halloween, the 31st. But people were like, are you going to go back down? I was like, nope, I'm at peace with her. And she resisted the whole way. So not only did she wasn't in any pain, but she resisted the whole way. She was scared to go. She was a very fearful woman anyway. Tell you the funny story. This is the paranormal part. Is so she died at 6 a.m. On a Monday morning, and for whatever reason, the doctor, because we had to fly her we were going to bury her here in New York, so we need to have them to sign the death certificate. The doctor didn't do it that day, so we lost the day that way. Then we had to find the right plane, and not every plane flies, remains, and until she got there, then she gets back here in New York, They go into the hearse to pick her up at the airport, the transition, and the car breaks down. Then they put her in a new car, and the bungee cord that holds the remains in the casket popped and hit the funeral director in the eye. And it's the next morning, I was like, "You have a black and blue on your eye." She goes, "Your mother." And I'm like, "I need to hear your story." Like it wasn't wrong, like she wasn't nasty. And I go, "I need to hear that story." And that's how she told me about the bungee cord. They locked her in so that doesn't move around, and it popped. So then, because I was comfortable in my mother's transition, the energy, I said, I'd love to have some really good energy at the funeral home. I asked my sister, can we clap for Sally? And she was like, no, I couldn't handle it. You're going to make me freak out. I go, okay, no problem. I won't do it. But I did start the eulogy. I said, hey, I just was so glad that my mom showed up a little late and I was going to clap. And then my nephew started clapping and everybody started clapping, which I know my mother would embrace. Then we go to the cemetery. They were doing construction in the cemetery on one of the roads. So we had to go around in a cemetery, not like getting to the cemetery. I'm like, talk about somebody who is resistant. Then it goes one more step further is in the Jewish faith, when you come home, you're supposed to have hard-boiled egg. It's about symbolizing the life that comes in and we eat it, especially those in mourning. Well, we forgot to do that. Whatever happened, we forgot to make the hard-boiled eggs, but we had egg salad. So I go, don't worry about it. We have egg salad. And my sister was all upset. And my mother was always one of these people who were like, well, this is what the rules were. And then I go to a friend, a couple of weeks after my mom, I was missing my mom. I still felt sadness around it. And I said, Janet, would you just, is my mom coming through? I go, I have to me. I go, I don't know if she's angry. And she goes, I don't know if she's angry either. But she says, there's something about eggs. I don't know what you're talking about. And I go, no way. I go, that's how I knew that was my mother because that's a very Sally story. And I know that I enjoy it. And, I get to tell those stories about that. And I think that's really one of the magical pieces of life when we're open to seeing the things. I mean, I have other stories. When my best friend passed away unexpectedly, and then I took care of his mom. His mom then transitioned within 6 months, but she had Alzheimer's. But at 1:11 p.m., there was in a bright blue sky, there was one lightning bolt. And I was like, okay, I thought it was just me that I saw it. We got out of the car right before we buried her. And the rabbi was like, did anybody notice that time? Like, and other people like, we saw the lightning bolt. And I'm like, yeah, it was at 1:11. It was at 1:11 in my car. They go, yeah, like in all their cars also. I was like, they're telling me, and I get chills like just talking about it, that they're together. Like I knew that my friend and his mom, because that was, if you want to talk about love stories, that was one of the most beautiful love stories that you were able to see. How he took care of his mother, and part of his illness, the high blood pressure, was because his mother at that time wasn't his mother anymore. So there was stories like that you want to call paranormal. I do because it shows we're still alive. And he wasn't somebody who believed in the paranormal. And I once asked, and he had come through, and I said, well, why do you believe it now? Like trying to push back with the medium. And he goes, yeah, I didn't see it from this end. He goes, now I'm seeing it from the other end. He goes, I'm right here with you. And I'm like, there's just so much that happens that way. And, that's where we want our energies to move. That's why when I talk to people and I assist people writing books, statistically speaking, we all only live two generations. We live, the next generation if you have children, maybe one more generation if you have grandchildren, if you're lucky enough. But great grandchildren, very rarely, and very rarely will your grandchildren talk too much about great grandpa, right? So to their kids, or so maybe three generations, but generally it's statistically it's two generations. And that's why I was like, hey, let's start creating these legacy books where we are able to tell our stories. Because while I was one of those rare people who knew a lot of the stories that my grandfathers told, I don't know them all. And I would love to, sit on that bench and have one more talk with my Zeta and married into families, these stories of people, that the richness of their lives, we don't get to touch them anymore when they're not with us. And if we don't know the stories, we lose the stories, because when we do then connect in a medium way, they just want to tell us that we're fine and they send love. They don't sit there and tell us stories. That's why we need to make more and more time with the people while we're here, appreciate them. And I make people, because I've had these sudden losses in my life, that I make people uncomfortable by saying I love you and mean it. Unconditional love. That doesn't mean I'm looking for you to say it back. It's really a conversation that my energy. That's why when I don't, the people that I aren't in my life who are still here, I still every morning during my gratitudes, I send love to them. I wish them peace and love. And when you can live that type of life, that becomes a different thing. That doesn't mean that I don't have days and I don't, curse or, nasty. It just means I try to always go back and recenter myself to who I am because I know the energies out there in the world.
And what you do with your energy is that you radiate out that positiveness and that love and that acceptance and that gratitude to everyone that's around you. And whether people can openly receive that love, because some people don't really do the love word, they find it really tricky because of trauma and things they've gone through. They're still getting that energy that you're radiating out, whether they really want it or not. They're getting a little bit of that, and it makes them feel really, really good.
Yeah, it flashes on them, is it exactly as I say. I throw out that love energy, and you can resist all you want, but at some point you're going to receive it. It's just an energy. It flows through us. It's not necessarily even my energy to own. It's just moving it along. Again, it's like a river. We're not necessarily moving the river along. We can we can dive in the river, we can push the water along, but the water is still going with us or without us. And that's why no matter what happens in life, I've found a lot more peace by saying, okay, somebody might not want the best for me, but I still wish them the best. And it's hard. I'm not perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. Do I get angry at people? Sure. But I try to help as much as I can or acknowledge within myself. I do ho'oponopono, right? That what we can heal within ourselves can heal the world. What I could heal, if I feel something for somebody else, that means I need more healing within myself. And when I talk about this, a lot of people go, "Oh, that's hokey, that's crazy." I would have told you the same thing, many years ago. The change within me has been great because I embraced all this paranormal, the energy, the God energy, whatever you want to title it. I've felt it so much differently. I even understand within myself the energies when I feel that uncomfortable level of stuff. And when we could do that, that's real true healing. When you can start attuning yourself and going through really bad situations, but knowing that the energy will still flow, once we can get through the rough seas.
That is the perfect awareness to have, is to observe it and to appreciate it, and even the mistakes and the things that we find really difficult. There's always learning in them. There's always something that we can take from it. Now, would you like to share, David, would you like to share with everyone how they can connect with you and learn about what you're doing, how they can find you on the social media platforms?
Yeah, well, the great thing is my last name is very unique, so there's not too many of us. DavidChametzky.com, and the way to spell Chametzky is ChametzKy. A lot of people get scared, so it's DavidChametzky.com. That's my website, so you can see some of the work I do. Or on social media, I'm David Chametzky. It's just easy to be who I am and be as authentic as possible. I do have a podcast called Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. And the Bring a Bat is not about violence or even sports. It's about being awesome today, being authentic, bringing authentic thoughts. So there's a lot of different things that we do. And when you swing a baseball bat, you want to be in the right balance to hit it right well. You want to hit your sweet spot. There's a certain part at the end of the bat, the sweet spot. You could hit it on the sweet spot and still not make a home run, still not get a home run. But if you've done the best that you could do, and I think that's the real mission for all of us. If we could do the best that we can do, that's all we can ask for. No matter what our results are, doing the best that we can do with the love that we have and the energies that we use in a balanced way, you're always going to be successful.
You were such an inspiration. You really do put a great big smile on my face. You're amazing. Now, I will, of course, include all of your contact details in the description box for the podcast and on my YouTube channel. And I just really want to say thank you so much for coming on Perfectly Paranormal today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I so appreciate it. You and I, as I said, we had our little challenges, but the universe brings it exactly when it's supposed to be. And this is the exact moment. So thank you, and God bless you for the opportunity.
So in episode 83, we are talking haunted objects and psychometry, which is the feeling and sensing of energy in objects, both positive and negative. And I have many, many experiences to share with you, highlighting entity attachment to items, and some you might not even suspect, such as a rather beautiful lapis lazuli necklace, and an innocent-looking antique chair, and the couch, the red couch at the hairdresser's. Now that was an interesting experience, and I can't wait to share it with you. And also, very importantly, I'm going to share some of the ways that you can assess items before buying them, using your own psychic abilities. And yes, you do have them. So tune in next week to lift the veil on haunted objects. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. You can email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.